You can come to Wakanda, conscious or unconscious.
You need to be conscious of the way that you look. Walking around here with that ash on your head.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Been a while since we've done one of these, but in honor of Black Panther 2, Wakanda Forever, we're taking a look at the origin of Iron People. We have Tony Stark Iron Man from Tales of Suspense, number 39. We have Riri Williams from Invincible Iron Man, number 1, 2016. That's what we're looking at today. So two very different comics. And look, I'm not a fool, of course. I'm pretty confident which one the audience here is going to go for. But the point here and why we do these side-by-side comparisons is to look at different eras, different storytelling types, different comics, so we can pull out some of the differences. It's one of the best ways that you can see pages side by side and see how times have changed. Now, granted, you're most likely going to like one time more than another time, but that's the whole point of doing this. So we get some real page-for-page proof of how comics have evolved, changed, gotten better, gotten worse, however you want to take it. So let's get right into it. As I said, 1963 to 2016, Tales of Suspense, number 39. Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, Art Heck for the big price of 12 cents, adjusted for inflation, or about $1.17. And then we're looking at Invincible Iron Man, number 1 from 2016. Brian Michael Bendis, Stefano Caselli on art. And as by way of background of these two books, first off, Tales of Suspense is somewhat of an anthology comic. Iron Man was the first story, but there are a couple others. There's a story about people, the last people to leave the Earth from a rocket. There was, and basically kind of a science fiction story. And then we had another one, Gundar, with Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. So, some pretty big names doing this stuff, kind of a mythology type story there. And, of course, the origin of Iron Man, sci-fi story, mythology story. That's what you're getting in this comic. Meanwhile, in Invincible Iron Man, this is the first relaunch in the Bendis on Iron Man era. He came onto the title a little bit earlier, did a few issues, and then promptly killed off Tony Stark in Civil War II. Captain Marvel actually killed him, and this was the relaunch for Marvel Now, where they rebooted the title. Riri Williams took the helm, as it were, to be Iron Man. She had introduced her earlier in the series, but this was kind of the first issue, and we get a little bit of an origin story. So let's take a look page by page what we've got here. So obviously two different covers. The Iron Man cover, pretty iconic. They've both parodied and referenced this cover many times. The Invincible Iron Man cover, not as much, but interestingly enough, the Iron Man that you see on the cover of Tales of Suspense is the Iron Man we'll get in the comic. The Iron Riri in Invincible Iron Man, this armor does not make an appearance in this comic, so for what it's worth, that's a bit of a difference. But as we get into the comic, Iron Man is born. We get this splash page that is Iron Man, widening someone's legs. Carving a hole in a wall there. Watch his awesome approach. Listen to his ponderous footsteps as he lumbers closer. For today, you are destined to encounter the Invincible Iron Man. The Invincible Iron Man was a mix between kind of a tech story back then and almost a little bit of a horror story. I mean, the idea of this kind of iron person who's relentlessly, fighting for good. There was a bit of a Frankenstein vibe to it. It was kind of mixing a number of genres. Meanwhile, over in Invincible Iron Man, we get kind of a background in Riri Williams growing up in Chicago. We get, Riri's parents, and basically the principal here is basically telling you she's a genius and she's bored and she's too smart for all of us. So both comics kind of begin the same way. We get the origin of Tony Stark. We learn that he's a weapon supplier, inventor, super smart. He's doing stuff with magnets that causes an entire door to crack, and we see that he's very smart, with these inventions and things he's doing. Meanwhile, over in Invincible, we get the school basically telling the parents she's smart while the girl stands outside. And then that kind of leads in. Now, the Iron Man from '63 is a pretty straightforward narrative. We're not flashing back and forth. We learn about Tony Stark. We learn that all the women are super horny for him. He's dating. He's rich. He's a millionaire bachelor. As much at home in a laboratory as in high society. We get kind of a lot of his backstory in basically two to three panels. And then we're introduced to the villain. This is Wong Chu, the Red Gorilla Tyrant, who's his South Vietnamese militia here is kind of invading, and then he's punching them around. He has this challenge where he wrestles them in his pajamas, and he's the strongest of all. Evil communist dictator here. And meanwhile, in the modern version, 2016, Riri is flying around. We get this little selfie intro that would become, very much a signature of Bendis's run. And she talks a little bit about what's going on. Meanwhile, we learn that Tony Stark is kind of checking out some of the South Vietnamese. He's going to supply them with some weapons. He gets ambushed. Obviously, in the movies that would come, they would change this origin to be Afghanistan. But that's what's going on here. Is Tony is wandering around, and then there's an ambush, and he's kidnapped by this evil tyrant, Wong Chu. So in the modern version of Iron Man in 2016, Riri has shown up to a college or something in Cheyenne. And there's basically this kind of demon invasion that's going on here. And she's here to kind of test out the armor and stop things. So we learned this villain, Animax, who had appeared in the X-Men, and she's angry because they're going to put her into a loony bin, I guess. I don't know. She can summon demons, so she's angry, and we're getting a lot of kind of Bendis-y dialogue here. She's tearing this system down on her way out of here. Meanwhile, the evil dictator back in 1963. We learn that Tony Stark has shrapnel that's going to reach his heart. Nothing can save him. And Wong Chu is going to trick him into spending his last days on Earth building weapons for them. So they enter into this deal where Tony is aware that he's being deceived, but he's basically going to use his last act to defeat these evil terrorists. So he's going to use this technology that he's been given access to. It's supposed to go to weapons to kind of save his life. And he's up against the clock, so every tick of the clock is bringing this deadly shrapnel closer to his heart. So he's got to work faster than ever before. He's got a very baked-in, fatal weakness. So as the comic continues, Tony Stark builds this weapon. He gets this friend, this old one, Professor Yinsen, so this lowly scientist that is kind of chucked in on Tony Stark's second day in captivity, who's going to help him. And the two get a bit of a friendship. I mean, it's not a long friendship. This is a few days. It's not entirely clear how much time. It says hours pass into days. The shrapnel is getting worse and worse. Tony is getting weaker, but they've developed this kind of iron girdle that's going to go around and help keep Tony alive through magnets. You get the wonderful line here in 63, the self-lubrication system is completed. Well, that's a good thing. Anyway, so they basically build this armor, and it lights up. He's got to build up a generator to save Tony. But as he's doing this, the enemy is approaching. Wong Chu's soldiers are coming to check things out. So he knows that he has to buy Tony Stark just a little bit more time. And so he distracts the guards to allow the heart of Tony Stark to be saved and the energy to build up. So he distracts the guards, gets shot and killed, and they murder him. And Tony has to just sit there laying helpless in this Iron Man suit of armor that is charging up. So meanwhile in 2016, we're getting some battles with the demons. Riri is kind of punching them out one by one, but they keep coming because Animax can just produce more. And that's she's in this battle that is somewhat going nowhere. Meanwhile, Tony Stark in 1963 has lumbered alive. He's now getting the feel of his armor, and he's about ready to kind of do things. We're learning a bit about his powers. He can use his magnets to soar into the air to basically fly. He hides from the guards and decides to don for whatever reason, for like 3 panels, he dons a hat and a jacket to kind of sneak out, which makes virtually no sense whatsoever. But he sneaks out, and challenges Wong Chu to a fight. And that's, basically I'm the Iron Man, and he easily does some good helicopter wrestling moves and chucks him away. Over in the 2016 Invincible Iron Man, we're continuing with Riri Williams. So we've done a 5-year flashback into Chicago where she's an inventor, and she's, she doesn't want to play with friends. And so this girl comes over and wants to go hang out. And they basically become friends. They bond over who's your favorite superhero. Spider-Man, Doctor Doom. They kind of talk back and forth. A little bit odd that, she's kind of enamored a little bit with Doctor Doom, but that's okay. But they basically get this friendship. Meanwhile, over in Tales of Suspense, this comic is almost over. So Iron Man is just cutting through Wong Chu's guards like they're nothing. And he's able to kind of use the technology, reverse the transistor to repel bullets, and easily is able to kind of wipe this guy out, including taking over his PA system and telling everybody you should get out of here and flee into the jungle. So Iron Man, quickly kind of cuts through where Wong Chu is barricaded himself, and then throws a filing cabinet. He gets a filing cabinet thrown on him. Wong Chu very craftily fills the filing cabinet with rocks. So Iron Man is briefly trapped, and he's going to get away, but Iron Man figures out how to put some oil onto the ammo dump and basically incinerates Wong Chu alive, killing him in a giant explosion, and saying, "I've avenged you, Professor Yinsen." And this kind of rubble of the Reds have all fled in panic. The prisoners are free, but now I'm Iron Man, the metallic Hulk, who was once Tony Stark playboy. Who knows what destiny will await him? So you kind of get a Hulk-like ending where he's now trapped in this iron lung, iron suit here. You could take off the legs and arms so he can pee comfortably, but he's still got this thing on that's got to have to keep his heart. So it's changed his life forever. So what will happen next? And he wanders out, and that's the end. That's the end of Tales of Suspense. Over in Iron Man, she's been fighting demons over here, and then we get another flashback from 2 years ago where they're hanging out at a park, they're having lunch, and everything is going okay. And then suddenly, people show up with guns, and just random act of street violence occurs. And that's so we get there interrupts their basketball game, and basically sprays bullets into the crowd. The dad tries to save the family and does, but in the process is shot and killed, as well as Riri's friend is also killed. And so there's a massive tragedy here as the senseless gun violence in Chicago has claimed several lives. That brings us back to the present, where Riri finally figures out that if Alchemix is generating all of these demons, then the trick is to just take her out. So she ejecto gloves, and they fly through the air and punch Alchemix in the noggin, and that stops everything and basically ends the danger. However, the police, because they are who they are, we have a cadre of white police officers see this, this iron hero who just saved them, and presumably you kind of get the feeling that her, because her arms are temporarily exposed, we see that it's a black character underneath Iron Man, and we never had that before, right? I mean, Rhodey's never. Anyway, so they immediately open fire and start shooting at Iron Man or Riri in the iron suit, and she's of course unharmed, and she contemplates. You kind of get the sense that she's thinking about just incinerating them alive, but no, she actually pulls the guns in using her kind of magnet rays and crushes the gun, looks angry, and flees off into the air and back to Chicago. So the comic wraps up with her doing some additional tinkering on the suit when a mysterious person comes in and delivers a box that basically turns out to be a Tony Stark AI that's going to help her kind of fight crime and be a hero. So that is, he's heard of her, and he's here to help her. And that's how our comic ends. And so we get through that's how it kicks off. Now, this comic would run for not too long, and then it would be rebooted again when Tony Stark was revealed to be back alive, and such is the way it is. But that's our origin of Riri and our origin of Tony Stark. So a couple little summary parts. Tales of Suspense, the Iron Man story, 13 pages. Invincible Iron Man, 22 pages. 0 variants, of course, for Tales of Suspense. Certainly it's been reprinted plenty. At least 12 variants for Invincible Iron Man. There were a bunch of comic shop variants, including one where Riri was drawn by J. Scott Campbell, somewhat sexy, and it got everybody super pissed off, and Twitter was angry for 48 hours. Same penciler and inker in both cases, so that's we had that. It's very difficult to determine the number of copies that were sold. The estimate probably puts it somewhere in the 500,000 range for Tales of Suspense, if you're counting all the reprints and kind of other things that go along with it, not the trades, but they've done facsimile editions of this that had about 75,000 copies sold. They've had a couple different versions of this, so it's probably somewhere in that realm. Invincible Iron Man, 97 copies. It obviously did not stay at that level, as once the variant covers were out of the gate, it immediately dropped pretty quickly. In short, this comic book, as I mentioned, is a pretty stark example of 2 comic characters introduced in 2 eras in the ways that it was done. One obviously in the vein of Stan Lee, and one obviously in the vein of Brian Michael Bendis. Both books featured the heroes battling pretty generic villains, and then touched on their backstory along the way. While the comic ends with Tony Stark facing an unknown future, Riri is determined and gains immediate assistance from AI Stark, which would kind of set up her status quo. So a little bit of a different kind of outcome. One comic was this guy going into isolation. The other was kind of, it'd be several issues before Tony Stark got back to kind of his playboy status, and then he was keeping this dark secret, whereas Riri was a little bit more out with it from the beginning. In both comics, the character loses people close to them. In Tony's, though, it was somebody he knew for like 2 days. And both comics, for what it's worth, little trivia, both comics featured the early gray versions of the armor that they would rather than the armor they would ultimately be known for. So clear parallel between the two. Undoubtedly, that was a bit on Bendis's mind. So that's it. That's our comic. Again, 2 very different storytelling types. That's how Riri began, and that's how Tony Stark began. So let me know your observations, your thoughts on these 2 comics, what you see, what you think when you see them. And let me know what comics you'd like to see compared next. Like and subscribe, introduce the channel to a friend, share it, all that kind of good stuff. And thanks for listening.